Swann here, and this is More Than a Love Interest, the show where we talk about the arcs of female characters in film. Today we are talking about Elizabeth Swann in the second film of the Pirates of the Caribbean franchise. We're going to talk about how she fits into the themes of the movie, her character arc, and her relationships with other characters. Let's get started.
Go!
Alright, as I talked about in my last video on Elizabeth ages ago,
I feel nothing. For too long I've been parched of thirst and unable to quench it.
this series was made for me specifically. Historical fantasy is my absolute fave, and this setting is just chef's kiss.
Same story, different versions, and all are true.
I mean, I would kill to live somewhere with this aesthetic.
Oh. That's why.
However, Dead Man's Chest is not my favorite of the trilogy. Don't really talk about these two. And I think there are 3 reasons for that. First, because it's mainly Jack's story and less about Will and Elizabeth, who are definitely the co-protagonists of the other two.
Will, how many times must I ask you to call me Elizabeth?
At least once more, Miss Swann. As always.
Elizabeth Swann, do you take me to be your husband?
I do!
Great.
Second, because it's a bit darker in tone than the rest. Like, okay, calm down, edgelords.
To the depths.
I'm a big fan of ghost stories and the capital R romantic genre, but this is a bit too far, in my opinion. Anyway, the third reason, and the point of this section, is the main theme of the story.
It'll take all of us to crew the Black Pearl!
You wouldn't need everyone! About 6 would do!
Hurry!
Now, there is an important through line that goes into the next movie.
We're not immortal no more. We got to take care of our immortal souls.
Do you fear death?
You have a touch of destiny about you.
Everyone here is questioning what they're going to do with the rest of their lives, with eternity, and that gets planted in Dead Man's Chest, but it's not really the overarching theme of this movie. So my hot take here is that Dead Man's Chest isn't scattered or confusing. It has a main theme that it sticks to throughout.
You tricked me onto that ship to square your debt with Jones.
It's just one that we don't really enjoy seeing very much, because it is betrayal.
Everything you said to me, every word was a lie.
And watching our friends betray each other doesn't make for a very fun movie.
I understand. It's a game of deception.
But the thesis of the film is right here.
Every man has a price he will willingly accept, even for what he hoped never to sell.
Now, betrayal was a significant thing in the last film. Keep to the code and all that.
Any man who falls behind is left behind.
However, everyone made up for it afterward. Will comes back at the end for Jack, as does the crew. Barbossa was the only betrayer who did not make amends for it, and he died.
I feel cold.
But here, well, who falls behind and who gets left behind? What did our characters hope never to sell, but find themselves accepting a price for?
Price? Just how many souls do you think my soul is worth?
It's never about winning or losing.
Now, this video is about Elizabeth, so I'm not going to go into every example in the film. Instead, I'm going to focus on how she fits in with what everyone else is doing. And specifically, how we get from here...
He's a pirate.
...to here.
Pirates.
The beginning of the movie is entirely based on how our protagonists are going to have to reconcile with their previous actions.
Piracy itself can be the right course.
The wedding is broken up because they chose to save Jack from hanging, which was an act of mercy. And that act haunts all our formerly lawfully good characters. Norrington has to chase the pearl to the ends of the earth and loses his good name as a result, which is why he becomes quite ruthless by the end of the movie.
He had these. He must have something to trade. The heart of Davy Jones.
Yeah, he's selling out the pirates, which of course makes sense for his character, but he also betrays Elizabeth to get his position back.
We're not getting out of this.
Not with the chest. Into the boat.
You're mad.
Don't wait for me.
Governor Swann also loses his position and fails to save his daughter, or to ever see her again, as it turns out.
I'm so proud of you, Elizabeth.
He accepts her safety as the price for sacrificing his loyalty,
Do what you can for my daughter.
a quality he thought all important before.
Loyalty is no longer the currency of the realm, as your father believes.
Will is the only one to spend a while bartering before he sells out, but he also wagers his eternal fate.
The stakes. My soul. An eternity of servitude.
And he loses, I might add.
The Dutchman must have a captain. Ready on the gun!
He's a bit slower to start up with the betrayal and does more of it in the next movie, as he is sacrificing everything to save his father.
I keep the promises I make, Jack. I intend to free my father.
Anyway, now we will finally talk about Elizabeth. First, one unique thing about her is that she does not care about destiny or superstition. She uses the superstitions of others to get what she wants and doesn't seem particularly worried about them herself. I would say Will is in the same boat as her, but they are unique among the characters. This is an important distinction because while many of our side characters are kind of the butt of a joke for their superstitions,
The black spot.
Black spot!
Black spot!
they aren't actually wrong.
Land is where you are safe, Jack Sparrow. And so you will carry land with you. It helps.
All of these characters are in a fantasy world. Elizabeth accidentally summoned ghost pirates to kidnap her in the last movie just by wearing this necklace in the water. So this could easily mean that she lacks genre savvy and doesn't know what kind of story she's in, kind of like the last movie. Instead, she is generally portrayed as more aware of it than anyone else. She learned a lot from the previous movie and uses it in this one to survive.
What's that over there?
But who exactly did she learn from on the Black Pearl? Will teamed up with Jack and was basically mentored by him, while Elizabeth spent a lot of time with Barbossa, who represents, both to the audience and to her, what it means to be a pirate.
The code is more what you'd call guidelines than actual rules.
And the most important act in his backstory is the mutiny, even if it didn't work out so great for him. But Elizabeth saw the aftermath and, importantly, how Jack used what he knew about it to get what he really wanted. Thus, while Will's adventure is about how
You can accept that your father was a pirate and a good man, or you can't.
Elizabeth's mentors in piracy are tenacious survivors who will absolutely sell you out if it means getting what they want.
That's exactly the attitude that lost you the pearl. People are easy to search when they're dead.
If we consider that as our lens, her actions make a lot more sense. Her wedding is stopped, and while Will and her father both come up with complicated shenanigans to save her, she correctly realizes that Cutler Beckett has no use for her, and therefore no reason to keep his bargain with anyone on her behalf.
I expect then that we can come to some sort of understanding. I'm here to negotiate.
So she doesn't even stick around to see if her father's plan will work, let alone Will's. She goes after what is actually important.
These letters of marque, they are signed by the king.
Now, Beckett seems to assume that she's going to do the same thing as Will, effectively complete their bargain.
He's not going to Jack.
Oh, really?
But she has no intention of doing that. She knows there's no point.
To ensure Mr. Turner's freedom, then?
She uses his own ideas against him to get the upper hand. In this case, she gets the letters and information.
There's more than one chest of value in these waters.
Then she uses the sailors' superstitions to get them to go to Tortuga, where she expects to find Will.
Where will you find him?
Tortuga.
I'm going to talk more about her relationship with Jack later on, but she clearly wants to trust him here on this adventure.
Are you telling the truth?
Like Will, she accepts the idea of some superstition because she expects Jack to know what he's doing.
Where does it point?
It points to the thing you want most.
But remember, her mentor was Barbossa, and that is going to be important before the end. Thus far, we've seen her give up on Will, on her father, manipulate Beckett, trick these sailors, trick these pirates, toy with Jack, but then she has this pesky compass.
This doesn't work. And it certainly doesn't show you what you want most.
And it's more difficult to trick people when there's a sort of lie detector in her pocket, making her start to doubt herself and her convictions. She's definitely been in an ends justify the means mode of behavior for most of the movie, without caring about any superstitions.
It's frightful bad luck to bring a woman aboard, sir.
Until this comes along, and now she has to decide if she believes it, and if she believes Jack. Then finally she gets back to Will, which should be the culmination of all of her machinations, but he's got a new priority besides them running off together, and now her tactics don't work. Her attempt to trick all three men fails.
The hate!
So now maybe she needs to go back to being lawfully good? And it falls to her to take control of the situation and protect the chest. I'll get more into this later as well. Back on the ship, her role is flipped. She's no longer the one who can easily manipulate others, but rather is the most trusted person.
Whatever you do, don't miss.
Will trusts her implicitly throughout this battle, and I think that really helps us as an audience to trust her as well, when our sympathy might otherwise have been tested by her deceit. And we importantly see that Will is right to trust her, and not to trust Jack. Even if he doesn't notice Jack fleeing and subsequently returning, Elizabeth does.
You coward.
And Elizabeth also sees the situation more clearly than Will.
People are easy to search when they're dead.
And unlike Jack, she took that example to heart. So, like her mentor, she has to betray Jack. It's for a much better reason than Barbossa did, of course, and presumably a different method. She's trying to save all their lives, not get riches, and she knows just how to do it. She tested him out earlier to see how far she could push him.
Seeing as you're a good man, I know that you'd never put me in a position that would compromise my honor. I always knew you were a good man.
Right into the mast, as it turns out. He christens her.
Pirate.
And it's a perfect culmination of what she's been doing for the whole movie. Now she really is a pirate, just like the others. If she weren't racked with guilt, of course, but that's something we'll discuss in the next video.
Against the cold and the sorrow.
Overall, one thing I actually really like about this is that Elizabeth is not just given feminine ways to be a betrayer. Yeah, she kisses Jack to distract him and leave him to his fate, but the potential implicit misogyny is reduced by the fact that everyone's betraying everyone in this movie. She isn't presented as worse than anyone else, or better at this sort of thing than anyone else. We see that she has learned how to be a pirate, just like all the other characters. And it's important for your almost sole female character to not be singled out from the rest, especially when it comes to this kind of negative trait. And given the trajectory of her arc, it marks an important journey from governor's daughter down the slippery slope to pirate king. So let's talk about that arc.
All I want is to find Will.
Let's talk about Elizabeth's character journey in this film. Now, this is obviously connected to the following movie, and I initially wrote this to combine the two to really flesh out all of the steps, as you can see. However, I think she does go through the majority of the journey in Dead Man's Chest, so I wanted to talk about that specifically. As always, we are using Maureen Murdoch's Heroine's Journey. In her previous journey, Elizabeth was suffocated by her societal role, both metaphorically and literally.
I can't breathe.
She always loved stories about pirates, despite them being improper for her to enjoy.
Actually, I find it all fascinating.
Yes, that's what concerns me.
Her previous arc involved leaving her civilized station to go on the adventure of her dreams, discovering that all of what she dreamt of could be disappointing, and happily settling down with a pirate, regardless of social expectations. She took the idea of freedom to heart, but she didn't find it necessary to go all the way with it. She's happy.
He's a pirate.
So what can happen to push her back into the world of curses and pirates? Well, having Mr. Cutler Beckett break up her wedding.
I think it's bad luck for the groom to see the bride before the wedding.
And being put in jail.
This warrant is for Elizabeth Swann.
How is this? A marriage interrupted. Or fate intervenes.
However, I think it's especially important that she has a role in that separation. In the first movie, she is separated by being taken captive by the pirates, except she takes control of that.
What?
Parley. I invoke the right of parley.
And then negotiated with Barbossa, which is what led to her starting on her adventure. I'm not saying this encounter would have been pleasant if she had acted differently, but it is important that she has agency over how she ended up here.
Well, you may tell the captain that I am disinclined to acquiesce to his request.
So, in Dead Man's Chest, she may have been forcibly separated from Will and from her place in society, but the next steps are ones she chooses to take. Unlike before, she does not need a guide to enter the world of piracy, but uses what she's learned from Jack and also from Barbossa. So I'm going to argue that the actual feminine, if you'll excuse the term, from which she is separated is Will, specifically his straightforward approach to the world.
You forget your place, Turner.
It's right here, between you and Jack.
Where she also felt she belonged.
As is mine.
Elizabeth.
But that is taken from her.
He's all right to Jack.
Oh, really? To ensure Mr. Turner's freedom, then?
And her father...
Loyalty is no longer the currency of the realm, as your father believes.
...is also separated from her.
Do not ask me to endure the sight of my daughter walking to the gallows.
What this means for her character, then, is that she leaves behind constancy and loyalty, to an extent, to be a pirate as a means of survival. So that is her real separation in this movie, not just from wearing a lovely dress, though she obviously visually separates from that too, but her journey is about her morals being tested and seeing how far she is willing to go.
I'm here to negotiate.
I'm listening. I'm listening intently.
The second step is where the heroine finds masculine allies to guide her in this new world. As I said, Elizabeth is pretty unique here in that she doesn't actually gain any allies. Not really. She has mentors from the previous movie, so her allies are really just her new worldview, what she needs to do to survive in a world of pirates.
I'm hunting with wobbly-legged, rum-soaked pirates!
So this includes a form of self-preservation, like here, where she leaves, even though her father was prepared to send her to safety in England. She would rather go look for Will than be taken care of anymore.
I've arranged passage to England. The captain is a friend of mine.
No!
But it also includes improvisation, blending in on this ship.
She's probably naked.
And importantly, superstition. This is, after all, a world where Davy Jones literally exists and could come claim you, where cursed pirates are a thing. She understands the lore, she knows the story, so unlike the last movie where she
Best start believing in ghost stories.
She does now understand that she's in one, and that she can use that to her advantage.
She wants you to do something.
The Road of Trials is the third step, where the heroine survives new experiences with her allies. For Elizabeth, this is all the steps it takes to get from Port Royal to finding Jack on Tortuga.
I'm here to find the man I love.
Now, the reason she went to Tortuga is because that's where Will said he was going.
Where will you find him?
Tortuga.
Because remember, she is out here to find Will. She stole the letters of Mark, got them signed so she and Will could be pardoned. Not to fit into Jack's schemes.
Is to find the chest of Davy Jones, is it not?
To save Will.
So the trials are escaping from jail, leaving her father, getting to sea, being a sailor, manipulating them to go to Tortuga, fighting her way through the crowd, and going after Jack. As I said in the last section, all of these things rely on her understanding of pirates, her new sword skills, and her ability to improvise to get what she wants.
All I want is to find Will.
The fourth step is the illusion of success, where the heroine feels she's been successful with her masculine allies, but in reality is still going to end up in trouble. For Elizabeth, she's been a very successful pirate thus far. Her journey has been almost the same as Will's in the last one, and she didn't even need help to do it. Escaping the jail, doing some trickery to get on the high seas, getting to Tortuga for some new shipmates. And like Will in that movie, the love of her life is on a cursed pirate ship damned for eternity, and Jack is the only one who offers any avenue to get her love back.
Because I would think you'd want to find a way to save Will most.
And you'd have a way of doing that.
However, it is an illusion. As before, Jack has his own plans going and is willing to use Will and Elizabeth as needed to get what he wants.
Why doesn't your compass work?
Even if he currently doesn't know what that is.
Jack Sparrow does not know what he wants.
The next step is when the heroine is depressed because her success in the previous step was an illusion. Elizabeth has that here, where she's on the Pearl and they are underway, ostensibly to go get what's gonna save Will.
Yes, he did say something about a chest.
She tells Jack about the bargain for the letters of Mark, and he takes these from her. Okay, so I'm going to get more into this whole thing with Jack and Norrington in the next section, but for this part of her journey, she is alarmed at the idea that Jack is the reason Will is on the Dutchman.
So you never wondered how your latest fiancé ended up on the Flying Dutchman in the first place?
And that the compass points in his direction. This is up for interpretation, but first she was pleased at how well she was doing with her pirating.
Persuasion.
Friendly?
Decidedly not.
Following Will's footsteps and trusting Jack, because he really did have a plan that saved both of them in the last movie. So even if she was disillusioned with him when they were marooned, he came through after that. Norrington's suggestion that Jack's plans might work, whether or not Will is a casualty of them, is definitely a concern.
Will strikes a deal for these and upholds it with honor. Yet you were the one standing here with the prize.
And you could argue that the compass isn't pointing at Jack, that it's pointing at the letters of Mark he took from her. All of this suggests to her that maybe things aren't going to go the same way they did before.
I don't know what you mean.
Oh, I think you do.
Oh, don't be absurd. I trust him, that's all.
The next step is the descent, where the heroine reconsiders her choices and comes back more sure of herself and has a way to go forward. For Elizabeth, I think this doesn't really happen on screen, but quite unusually, there is evidence that implies it had to have happened, because we do see a change in her worldview. But basically, between this chat with Norrington and Jack and this one, she's certainly changed tactics with regards to Jack.
Because you and I are alike. And there will come a moment when you have a chance to show it.
And that must have come from somewhere.
Curiosity. You're going to want it.
Alright, so this step is when the heroine urgently yearns to reconnect with the feminine. As I said at the beginning, the feminine is really the traits her father and her fiancé have, which she had valued but has abandoned in favor of traits she learned from Jack and Barbossa.
So perhaps you may wish to enhance your offer.
So during this scene, she explicitly states how she really wants Will back to be married.
I just thought I'd be married by now.
Jack misinterprets this and she gets upset at him, which suggests she has at least reconsidered whatever made her smile here. She then tries to insist that Jack has positive traits of his own, that she knows he could be just as heroic as Will.
To do the right thing.
I would say this is a reiteration of this conversation.
But you're Captain Jack Sparrow!
Where she was disappointed in what turned out to be the
secret grand adventure of the infamous Jack Sparrow.
Except now she is trying to turn him into that hero instead of just figuring things out for herself.
Oh, I have faith in you.
So she both urgently wants to reconnect with Will for obvious reasons,
If it weren't for these bars, I'd have you already.
but also because she wants Jack to prove that he has good qualities she can trust in, that his current plan isn't going to get them all killed.
I trust him, that's all.
It also foreshadows the end of the movie. She insists he could do the heroic thing.
You're going to want it. A chance to be admired and gain the rewards that follow.
While he insists she could do the selfish thing.
To act on selfish impulse. You want to see what it's like.
This is the only way, don't you see? I'm not sorry.
The eighth step is healing the split from the feminine. Obviously, Elizabeth does not reunite with her father again, but she does finally find Will.
I came to find you.
Or, well, he finds her.
With good reason.
Will?
His reappearance also restores her moral compass, which was certainly not working as well as it normally does.
This doesn't work. And it certainly doesn't show you what you want most.
While Jack continues to get up to his antics, betraying and outmaneuvering, she mostly returns to the Elizabeth from the last movie.
Everything you said to me, every word was a lie. That's it then. You spent 3 days lying on a beach drinking rum.
Just now with sword action. This return of morality is evident in that her attempt to manipulate these guys fails.
Oh! Oh! The hate!
And then after she chases down Pintel and Rigetti, all three of them work very well together and show an unpiratey level of trust during this fight, which is pretty cool.
Sword!
Sword! Sword! Sword!
The ninth step is making peace with the masculine, in this case, with piracy. Elizabeth returns to the Black Pearl, and they mount a defensive against the Dutchman and then the Kraken. She uses what she knows to help, and importantly, is greatly trusted by Will to be the one to make the shot.
Whatever you do, don't miss.
As soon as you're clear.
I'll get back to this in the next section. But there's also this moment when she feels she can really trust Jack. He had escaped and was getting away, but he came back, and she reacts strongly to that.
You coward.
Finally, the heroine integrates the masculine and the feminine, and Elizabeth has a unique approach to doing that. The feminine at the start of the movie included traits like loyalty and constancy that her father and her fiancé represent for her.
Our name still has some standing with the king. I've arranged passage to England. The captain is a friend of mine.
Have you not met Will Turner? He's noble, heroic.
And now she's choosing that those are more important than what she learned as a pirate. Or I should say, as important. She is willing to be the one to make the hard choice, to prove her loyalty and constancy, but through honoring the code and leaving Jack behind. She had hoped he would be like he was in the last movie, or even just moments ago, and willing to go down with the ship like a good captain should.
He elected to stay behind to give us a chance.
But he won't, so she integrates being a pirate with her own morals and insists that he live up to her expectations this time, even if she has to force him to, because it turns out that Jack is the price she's willing to pay.
I'm not sorry.
So overall, this journey is pretty different from the others that I've covered. Part of this is that it continues into the next movie and that it ends on a tragedy. But I do like that the masculine and feminine dichotomy for Elizabeth changed from the last movie, where it was just her being taken away from civilization and going back to it at the end. Here, she definitely integrates what it means to be a pirate into her actions, now and in the future. It's almost the reverse of this line.
It's the honest ones you want to watch out for. Because you can never predict when they're going to do something incredibly stupid.
Because she has used that honest streak, combined it with piracy, and turned into a much more ruthless person than most of the other characters.
This is the only way, don't you see?
Female characters do not usually get to be ruthless without being demonized by the narrative. And people are not the happiest with her when they find out, but this is not framed as Elizabeth just being that wicked woman who seduced this dude to murder him. She did what she had to do, and Jack is our point of view character for this movie, so him agreeing with her carries a lot of weight. It's what he would have done, isn't it?
Pirates.
Alright, for the last section today, I want to talk about how Elizabeth is framed by the movie, both in terms of what we literally see and how she is treated by the other characters. So first, let's start with a super fun thing to analyze on YouTube: sex.
Fine! Let's just pull out our swords and start banging away at each other. That will solve everything!
And then we'll talk about her relationships with the other male characters and where she falls on the objectified to agency having side of things with each of them.
This is going to save Elizabeth.
To kick this off, Elizabeth is sexualized probably more in this movie than she was in the last one. So in The Curse of the Black Pearl, we had,
Hello, Poppy. You'll be dining with the crew, and you'll be naked. It's still warm.
The scenery has definitely improved.
But the majority of the people speaking are explicitly villains. They're the bad guys, and Jack was at least a morally dubious guy.
Whose side is Jack on?
At the moment.
Thus, as I talked about in that video, these statements weren't especially noticeable or dehumanizing because, well, villains tend to dehumanize folks, and the camera at no point joined in with the leering.
Though it does seem a shame to lose something so fine, don't it, lads?
So how do they do in Dead Man's Chest? Pretty well, actually, but with a notable exception we'll get to in a moment. First, we have this joke in the jail. These are clearly criminals, and we don't need to get into how the criminal justice system of Port Royal is obviously suspect.
And other fugitives from justice.
Justice? Hardly.
So yeah, it's a funny joke. Again, the camera isn't making the scene salacious, and none of the dudes say anything particularly gross, so it's fine. The joke is more at the expense of the criminals than at Elizabeth, who remains more our point of view. We aren't invited to join them in treating her sitting there as salacious, I mean.
We don't bite.
Similarly, we have this line from the captain here, which I think also puts us more in her shoes than in these dudes who want to ogle her.
Oh, and she's probably naked.
It's the first test of her disguise, if she can act like the young man she's pretending to be, and it's a funny first test, which again makes the joke at the expense of these dudes instead of at her. Next, probably the biggest positive is Elizabeth herself. We have her saying this:
If it weren't for these bars, I'd have you already.
Which, honestly, I find refreshing. Women so rarely get to express desire in any medium without it being painted in a negative light. So I really like that Elizabeth is, DTF.
To be your wife!
And isn't ashamed of that fact. She does wait for the lawful bonds of matrimony, after all.
Mrs. Turner.
She brings it up again here.
I just thought I'd be married by now. I'm so ready to be married.
And she's clearly not just talking about setting up a house or wearing this pretty dress again. As she says to Beckett,
It's that you robbed me of my wedding night.
Media rarely treats female desire as a thing that exists and might be a driving force for a female character. So I really like it being included with Elizabeth here instead of making her a sort of sexless girl boss.
Blacksmith's hands. I know they're rough.
I mean, yes, they are, but don't stop.
So her relationship with Will is pretty charged, but more explicitly from Elizabeth's point of view, which is rare. We don't have to be reassured that Will's girl is hot, like most movies make a point of doing. We get to have her say how ready she is to be married to him.
He's a better man than you give him credit for.
Both of their primary motivations for the film are saving each other and reuniting. And when they do, Will is pretty clear about the fact that she's the only one he trusts.
Guard the chest! Fire! Whatever you do, don't miss.
He trusts her completely, and well, that doesn't go fantastically in the end, but that's the next video.
Where's Jack?
We'll get into the whole Jack and Elizabeth thing in a moment, but first I just want to talk about Pintel and Rigetti. Those are the names of these dudes, by the way. So in the last movie, they were actively antagonistic towards Elizabeth, in a pretty skeevy way, to be honest. and they are set up to continue that here.
Hello, Poppy.
I would say the danger is, if anything, heightened in this confrontation. They're willing to abandon the chest to go after her, and this is a PG-13 movie, but heaven knows what they would do if there hadn't been a distraction. To the point that I think this was maybe a little overplayed. But then they join together, and I think it's fascinating how all three of them have been having moral quandaries. Well, Rigetti, at least, is worried for his immortal soul, and Elizabeth is toying with how far she'll take these piratical ideas. And especially given what I talked about in the first section about the theme of betrayal, it seems like they would be the most poised to try to betray each other. Except they don't. They immediately team up, and this whole scene contrasts perfectly with a Jack, Will, and Orrington situation. Those three are fighting over something none of them currently have, while the three who do have the chest are working together for the first time ever to protect it. I think this informs a lot of what Elizabeth does in the next movie, but it could also be a catalyst for her and how she deals with Jack.
Are you telling the truth?
So let's talk about Jack. Unfortunate actor developments aside. First, this movie is unlike the other two of the trilogy in that he's definitely the protagonist. He's immediately established as having cause not to act like he usually does.
Something's got Jack vexed. No! Leave it! Run!
Which continues throughout the movie, until the end, when he reclaims his hat and his identity as a mostly good man.
Hello, Beastie.
But one unfortunate thing about that is how the other characters tend to lose something in service of his story. The last movie definitely had Will and Elizabeth established as the main characters, with him being a sort of chaotic addition to the story that stole the show.
This is the day that you will always remember as the day that you...
Here, though, Will and Elizabeth may have their own sort of thing going on, but not nearly enough to escape the gravitational pull of Jack's story. And I mean this metatextually. For example, Will being on board with this whole conversation seems unlikely.
What we need to do is make sail for Port Royal with all haste.
I shall trade to you the compass if you will help me to find this.
Especially for as direct a person as he is in this movie.
You want me to find this?
No. You want you to find this.
He needs Jack's compass. Going through the rest of it seems like something he would push against more, you know?
Because the finding of this finds you incapacitorially finding and or locating in your discovering the detecting of a way to save your Dolly Bell.
But this video isn't about Will, it's about Elizabeth, and I feel that some of her story is lost in service of Jack's. As I said in her journey, a pretty important step is just implied instead of letting us see how she views Jack at all, let alone how it changes, because it's really not that clear.
I always knew you were a good man.
I'm not sorry.
Let's go through her motivations where Jack is concerned. She starts out just wanting information about Will from him.
And what you want most in this world is to find the chest of Davy Jones.
I think this conversation is a bit more convincing than the one with Will.
To save Will?
By finding the chest of Davy Jones.
But a lot of this hinges on our most lawful characters following along with some convoluted logic. Anyway, so fine. I buy her also excited to be out pirating again, especially as successful as she's been. So she goes along with his complicated plans, especially because Will is on another cursed ship and she doesn't know how to free him herself.
Poor Will has been press-ganged into Davy Jones's crew.
So she must trust who she considers an expert.
Because I would think you'd want to find a way to save Will most.
And you'd have a way of doing that.
But I certainly don't like this line.
Should it be a dress or nothing? I happen to have no dress in my cabin.
Unlike the other references to Elizabeth's sexuality, she's the butt of the joke here. It also seems out of character for Jack, who may have these ladies but has never treated Elizabeth the same way. He did see her dressed in man's clothes before and didn't feel a need to comment. And that brings me to the real question. Does Jack even like Elizabeth?
Save your Dolly Bell, old what's-her-face, Elizabeth. Hide the rum.
Before this conversation, is there any suggestion that he does?
We are very much alike, you and I and you, us.
He respects her, certainly.
There is a chest.
Oh, dear.
Possesses the leverage to command Jones to do whatever it is he or she wants.
But I would say after this moment,
Mastering terrible for you. What it bloody is now?
he finds her much more alarming than attractive.
To save a certain distressing damsel. Or rather, damsel in distress.
All of which I bring up because these moments strike me much more like fanfic based on a misinterpretation of their relationship in the last movie, or worse, just based on the fact that he's the main character, so of course the lady character would be into him, and vice versa, despite the fact that there's little evidence to suggest it. So I find even this smile to be strange and out of character for Elizabeth, as is this. And having Norrington say that he wishes she would think about him like that just seems like the writers trying too hard for their bait and switch to work. I believe Elizabeth would kiss Jack to distract him and he would fall for it because we already saw that work in the last movie. So this just seems like they want us to really believe that Will and Elizabeth might not end up together, which is silly and unnecessary.
If there was anything could be done to bring him back.
And if they're going for a love triangle, I don't think it really works because of the character motivation. At least in the last one, we had the idea that Jack really wants freedom and so does Elizabeth. So if they played more into that, you could see them agreeing, but we don't have Will as being anti-freedom or something.
I keep the promises I make, Jack. I intend to free my father.
But none of those ideas are actually played with in these scenes. So if they're going for a love triangle, it's just kind of half-baked. It's not really there.
We have to get off the ship.
There's no boats.
I'm deeply flattered, son, but my first and only love is the sea.
So overall, I think this movie continues representing Elizabeth as a person with agency first and foremost, even though her maturity is more obvious in this one, with more references to her desire. It generally fits her character and puts her in charge of the situation. And yes, especially how it ends. It makes sense for her to do this. And while it may have started as, wouldn't it be crazy if she kissed Jack? I don't feel like it was just thrown in there to add drama. It makes sense for both characters. Well, I do feel like this comment, where the joke is at her expense, and these actions of hers feel like they exist only for us to have some doubt about what romantic pairing may win the day, but it's still a pretty fantastic version of a female character. She may not be subverting as many tropes as she did in the first one, but Elizabeth as a person builds naturally here and learns to incorporate piracy with her other values, which will be important in the next movie.
Pirates.
King?
Overall, I do think it's a shame that Elizabeth is not as much of a main character as she was in the last film. But she continues to be an independent woman who is bucking the tropes of being the almost only lady in a pirate movie. Her romantic storyline continues to be refreshingly unique, and her ability to adapt to the world around her, even better than the men in her life, is especially exciting. I was definitely thrilled to see what she would do next.
I'm listening. I'm listening intently.
So, is Elizabeth more than a love interest? Very much so, especially since she spends most of the movie away from Will, forging her own path and trying to solve their problems with what she's learned.
I came to find you.
I would say the writing puts her a little bit too much in the love interest role for Jack a couple of times, but she reasserts herself before the end. This may be her worst appearance, but the other two are so fantastic that this one is still very good. And she's obviously a highlight of this movie. I just wish I had spent some more time on her.
You came back.
Thank you for listening to me talk about one of my all-time favorite characters.
I have seen the treasure myself.
Next time, we're talking about her co-star and how a goddess is treated in the Caribbean. Please like, comment, subscribe, ring the bell, join my Patreon, buy me a coffee, all those things so you don't miss it. See you then.